Hi, this is Kevin Trainer. Welcome to my tutorial on installing the MySQL software and the examples from the Murach MySQL book on Windows 10. I'm recording this in January 2017. So the software that I'm using is a copy of Windows 10 that is current for right now. And the software that I'm going to be installing is the current version of all the applicable software and materials that's available today. And I'm expecting this tutorial to have a life of a good year or more. And so it could be that when you go to do this, that the versions of things are going to be slightly different. And what I'm going to recommend that you do is that you try to install the newest version of everything that you can. So use the newest version of Windows that you can. When you go to find the MySQL software, use the most recent version of that. When you go to install the examples from the Murach textbook, there's probably only going to be one version there, but if there's more than one, install the newest. Okay. Basically, the approach that I take. The Murach MySQL second edition textbook is the text that we're using in the courses that I teach. And that book has an Appendix A, how to install the software for this book on Windows. And pretty loosely, that's the approach that I'm going to be following. Now, that approach is a little bit out of date because the book is already 2 years old. And so I'm going to be adapting it to our current circumstances. All right. So as you might see here, I have Windows 10. I tend to not like to work with the Windows browser. Okay. The new browser is called Edge, and it's problematic with some things in terms of compatibility, and if I can avoid it, I will. And as you can tell from the icons here, I've got Google Chrome installed and Mozilla Firefox, and today we're going to be using Chrome. Would this work with Edge? Well, it might. Okay, you could try it, but it might not. All right. So if you want to use the same things that I'm using, then I would advise you to have downloaded a copy of Google Chrome by the time you start. Okay, so I'm going to fire up Chrome, which I've done here, and it doesn't have to be my default browser, so that's okay. And what I want to do is I want to go to the website that's going to have the MySQL software, and the domain name that's going to work. It's actually a subdomain. It's dev.mysql.com. Okay, and we're going to get an opportunity to do a number of things, and I see the opportunity for MySQL downloads, so I'm going to click on that link. And you see the page I've come to says MySQL Community Downloads, and it's the Community Edition, the free edition that we're going to be using, so that's great. And there's going to be two different things that we're going to be installing. The MySQL Community Server, which is the server, and MySQL Workbench. Okay, so those are the things that we're going to install, and I'm going to click on the link for Community Server first. Okay, and as we come down here, we can see that there is a 32-bit MySQL installer MSI. So there's an installer package, and that's the one that we want because we don't. We would like a pretty typical Windows installer MSI package. So if I go over to the right here and I click on the button for download, and it takes me to another page that has all of these things. And there are two versions of the 32-bit MSI Windows installer. And one is a kind of tiny 1.7 megabytes, and the other one is bigger, but not gigantic, 387 megabytes. And I'm just going to pick the larger one, okay? Just because it's going to have less interaction with the network. All right, so I'm going to click on the download, and notice there are no, we didn't really get for the MSI, we didn't really get the opportunity to install a 60-bit version, a 64-bit version. So there wasn't a 64-bit installer. And I wouldn't worry about that. I have a 64-bit operating system, and we will install some 64-bit stuff, but the fact that this installer is 32-bit doesn't really concern me. So I'm going to take the lower of the two, click on download, and it's going to ask me to log in to my Oracle web account, which you can certainly do, but you don't have to. There's a little link down here that says, no thanks, just start my download. So I'm going to click on that link. And down here in the lower left corner, you can see that I've got the download going. So it's a MySQL installer, I think it says community after that, and it has the MSI extension. So that's what we're going to be looking for. And it looks like it's going to come down here in about a minute, which is, I've got a pretty fast connection here, so that's good. And so while that's downloading, let's go find where it's going to be downloading to. And I'm going to open the File Explorer. Okay. And it's going to be downloading to the downloads directory, probably more technically called the downloads library. And here we go. We've got this download that's unconfirmed. I think this is the one that's downloading right here. Oh, here and now it's all done. So it's called MySQL Installer Community, and it's got the version 5.7. That looks good. And I'm just going to double click on that to do the install. And I'm going to say it's okay to run. Okay. And you know what? Before we do that, let's just back up and do it slightly differently. So let's hit escape. Let's go back. Instead of double clicking on the installer, let's right click on it and say that we want to run as an administrator. I think that would be the thing that we would want to do. We can install, repair, uninstall, share with, so I don't seem to be able to run it as an admin. Let's try it one more time. No, it doesn't look like it. Well, the last time I installed it, it wasn't a problem for me. That I just went ahead and double-clicked on it. So let's do that again. All right, so we're going to run it. And we're going to say yes, allow it to make changes. And I'm going to say that again. And here's the installer. So we begin on this first panel by accepting the license, by clicking the checkbox, and clicking the next button. We're going to take the developer default as the version that we want. It'll probably install some extra stuff, but I really don't care about that. I'm going to click the next button. It says here, it brings up a check requirements page, and there are some prerequisites that need to be installed to get certain things to run. In particular, to get MySQL Workbench to run, we have to download and install the Microsoft Visual C++ 2013 runtime. Now, for right now, we're not going to do that. And then when that becomes a problem, we'll do it then. Okay, so we're not going to do anything on this warning screen except click on next. And do I wish to continue? Yes, I do. And now here's all the stuff that it would like to install. So I'm just going to click on execute button there. And it's going to install the software. And probably the only thing that we really needed to install here is the first thing. Okay. The MySQL Server version 5.7.17. Okay. So you'll notice that the install status is complete for everything but a connector, and that's the connector that we might be using if we were writing custom application programs, for instance, but we're not in this course, so that's not anything that we're really concerned about. So we're just going to go and click on next. And now it's going to say that we're going to want to do some configuration. So click on the next button. Config type development machine, and we're going to take all of the defaults. So this type and networking page, we're not going to change anything. We're going to click the next button. We're going to enter a password for the root account. Okay. Now, because each of us is going to have our own copy of MySQL on our own computer, we're really not going to get into user permissions and administration. We're going to work as the root. And I'm not saying that that's a good practice in a production environment, but I'm saying that that's going to do just fine for the purposes of our class. So we're not going to create any more users, and what I'd like to do is to tell all of my students to use the same password, and I believe the one that Murach suggests in the book is Sesame, as in Open Sesame. So it's S-E-S-A-M-E, and we're going to do it again. SESAME. And it's a pretty weak password, but we don't really care because we're not really setting up a database environment that needs to be secure. This is just going to be as secure as our PC is, and that's okay. All right, because we're just going to be using this for learning. So having put the two versions of the same password in, I'm going to click on Next. And it wants to set up a Windows service to run the server. And I kind of like all the defaults that we have here. So we're going to take the defaults and click on Next. And it's asking us if we want to use MySQL as a document store. And for our class, we're not going to. So I'm not going to check anything on this. I'm just going to take the defaults and click the Next button. And now it wants to apply that server configuration, and to get that to happen, we need to click the Execute button. We'll do that. And you can see we got the little notification that our list of services has changed. So it's added the service. That looks good. And now we're going to finish. Okay, and it looks like we're done on the configuration, so let's just go to Next. Here is the server that we have. We have MySQL Server version 5.7.17. You see, we did get the 64-bit architecture, even though we ran the 32-bit installer. Okay, so not to worry. Okay. And it wants to know if we can communicate with the server. So when we're working with the server, we're always going to be using the username root, which again is not a good long-term practice, but for learning, it's okay. And it already put our password in here, Sesame, and we're going to click Check, and it was able to connect to the server. So the server is installed and running as a service, everything that we'd like right there. So let's click the Next button. And we've got a couple of more parts of the configuration. Let's click that, and it's running some scripts, stopping the server. Okay, and let's click on Finish. Okay, so we've configured the server. We've also configured samples and examples, which we're probably not going to be using in the course, but it's always nice to have some more databases to look at, some sample databases. And we're going to click on the Next button, and now we're going to click on Finish. Okay, so we've got the server installed. That's pretty good. Now we're going to want to install MySQL Workbench, and Workbench is it's a program that runs on your computer that plays the role of the client in this client-server architecture of MySQL. And so it's Workbench that we're going to be doing most of our interacting with the product through. So let's go back to our browser. And as you will remember, we were working on downloads. Okay. And I just want to back up a bit. So I'm going to try to I'm going to try to just go up here and click on the tab for downloads. See if it goes anywhere I like. And so it's got a bunch of editions it took me to. Enterprise Edition is a paid edition. We don't want that. Clusters CGE, another paid edition. MySQL Community Edition, yeah, that's what we want. So we want to click on the link here for Community GPL downloads. So we click on that. And yeah, that's the page that we had come to before. That looks great. So we already have downloaded and installed the community server. What we haven't done yet is to download and install Workbench. Okay, and that's what we're going to want to do. So let's. There's a little link down here for Workbench. We'll click on that. Okay, and we can do things in a couple of orders here. You'll remember that when we were doing the install of the server, it warned us that we didn't have one of the things that we were going to need to run Workbench, and that was this Visual C++ redistributable for Visual Studio 2013. Now, it's probably good for us to just download and install that now, okay? Because it's a MySQL Workbench Windows prerequisite. There are two of them. One is the Microsoft.NET Framework for Client Profile, and that's already downloaded, okay? That came in Windows 10. So it's only this Visual C++ redistributable that we need to get. So I'm going to click on that. And we're going to select a language. Okay, that makes sense. English, that's good. We're going to click on download. And now it takes us to a page that I find kind of confusing. You need to pick the file that you want to download depending upon your architecture. Okay, so it's assuming that you're running Windows. Okay, but do you want 64-bit Windows? Or do you want 86? The 86 one is for 32-bit Windows. And I'm going to say I want the 64-bit Windows one. So they all have the same beginning of the name. And then the other one is for the ARM chip, would be something like a smartphone. Okay. So I'm taking the middle one, the one that ends where the file name ends in x64. And now I'm just going to click on Next. And we have another installer coming down. All right. And it's installing the file with the right name. Now, we could click around on that, but I just like to go back to my File Explorer and look in there in the downloads directory, and you'll see that we just got vcredist_x64. That's what we want. And we're just going to run that. That's an installer right there. So again, I'm going to double click this and say, okay, run. And I have to agree to the license. And I'm going to click the button for install. And I'm going to say yes, sure, we can make changes to the device. And it says the setup is successful, and let's close. Okay, now, so we began here on the downloading of MySQL Workbench, we remembered to download the Prerequisite, this C++, this visual C++ runtime. I just want to point out that had we forgotten to do that, and then we got on with the next part, it would have reminded us to do it, and it would have shown us some links. So if you get in the next part and you realize you haven't done this yet, then they give you some help. All right. Okay, so why don't we back up wherever we were. Okay, I am back to the page for download MySQL Workbench. I already have the prereqs, so now I just want to go down and find a proper installer. Okay, and let's see, we've got Windows 86 32-bit MySQL installer, and then which is kind of a link to certain other ones. Then we have a 32-bit and a 64-bit. I kind of like the idea. They're both MSI installers. Okay, so I'm liking the second one. It's claiming to be a 64-bit installer. So I'm going to take this second option under other downloads, and I'm going to click the download button. And it looks like the file that we're going to download, we're going to download version 6.3.8, and it's 26.7 megabytes. So click on download, and it gives you the option to log in again, but I'm just going to click on the link, no thanks, just start my download. And I would say that the idea of getting an Oracle web account login is a good one. I've had one for many, many years, and so I'm on all their mailing lists, and I get quite a bit of email from them. And it does allow me to download some products that I like. But the only reason that I decided I wasn't going to do it is I already have a login. Okay, and you don't need a login to do this. But if you wanted to go off and do that, I wouldn't be trying to talk you out of it. Okay, so this should be in the download folder again. So let's go to that, and we can see that we have MySQL Workbench Community Edition 6.3.8 64-bit version. Okay, and that's what I want. So I'm going to double click on that, and I'm going to choose Run. And here I come up in the dialog for the setup wizard. So I'm going to choose Next from the first panel. And it says it wants to install it in C program files. That looks good to me. So I'm not going to change that. Going to take the default and click on Next again. The setup type, the default is complete. I like that. So I'm going to take the default there and click on Next. It says it's ready to install the program, so it's kind of showing us what setup type and where it's going to go, and I'm still happy with those, so I'm going to click Install. And I'm going to say, yeah, sure, you can change my device. And it does some file copying. And now I'm going to click on Finish, and you'll notice that over here on the left side of this last panel is a checkbox that's already checked. It says we want to launch the Workbench product now. If we uncheck that, we wouldn't be launching it, but it's nice to launch. So we're going to click on Finish here, and it should be launching Workbench right now. So this is a copy of Workbench, and we're going to be learning about Workbench quite a bit in the first week of the course. But for now, I just want you to follow along. To use the server, we need to create a connection between this client, the Workbench client, and the server that we've already installed. So we're just going to, there's a connection that was pre-configured. Local instance MySQL 57 is the name of the server that we installed. And we're going to be signing in as root. So one left click, and it's going to ask us for the password. And as you remember, I'm recommending that we use the password Sesame, SESAME, and it has a password vault, so I'm going to check to save the password. And now I'm going to click on OK. And here we go. What we have here is we have the client that we're going to be working with. So just to give you a short tour, one of the main things that we're going to be doing is we're going to be writing SQL scripts, and the script editor is in this center panel. Okay, so we currently have a script editor open called Query 1. That's a little bit hard to see because it's in gray, but if we click on it, it goes into deep blue. And this is where we're going to be able to write queries. All right. So we're going to be doing a lot of our work in here, and we're going to be using the toolbar to run the queries. All right. Then over on the left, there's the typical navigation panel. Okay, and one important area there is where we have a list of schemas. And we can see that there are currently 3 schemas installed. We have Sequel, which is one of the demo schemas that came with the product because we told it to install the samples. We've got World, which is, I believe, another one of them, and Sys is part of the technical implementation, I believe. No, that was World, so I told it to open World. So let's just look at what's in Sys. Sysconfig, columns, set time, set by. Now, okay. So these are databases that we're not going to be working with in the course. In fact, what we're going to do is we're going to install 2 sets of databases. Today, we're going to be installing the example databases that are used in the textbooks, a textbook itself. Okay, and we're going to do that. At some later time, in about a week, I'm going to also have you install the, there is a separate set of files that we use for a separate set of exercises, which I use for assignments in the course. And so we'll be installing those files in about a week or 2. Okay, so let's close Workbench. Okay, and let's go get some. Let's go get the files that go with the textbook. Okay, so what is the textbook? Well, the textbook is MySQL by Joel Murach, second edition. And the website for the book is at murach.com, murach.com. So we're just going to go there in our browser. Murach Books, okay. And we want to get to the page for database books. So if I just go, if I mouse over the navigation bar on Shop Books, we'll see about halfway down Database Programming Books. That's the page we want to go to. And so I clicked on that, and we've got three possibilities. It's the middle one that we want, Murach's MySQL second edition. So we'll click on that. And now we're going to the page where we could buy the book if we wanted to buy the book, but I hope you've already bought the book at this point. And if we come down here towards the bottom, you can see that we have a tab for free downloads. So let's just click on free downloads. Okay. And down towards the bottom of that, we have we've got the book examples and exercises. That's what we want. There are two versions of them. There's a version for Windows, and then there's a version for Mac OS and Linux. And since we're working on Windows, we're going to take the Windows version because it comes with a nice installer, like the installer we just used for the software. So we want to download the top one of these two, exe file for Windows. Click on download now. And you would think that it would download, but no, it doesn't. They want to make sure that they have your information. So I'm going to put my information in here. And again, they send information about new updates to the books and things like that. In general, they're pretty well-behaved people. And since I'm recording this, and the first usage of this tutorial is going to be for my course at the iSchool at Illinois, I'm going to give my Illinois email address. Okay. For some reason, it doesn't seem to like that, but maybe that's because it doesn't spell check. And then I'm going to put it again. So if they don't match, I'll know, I guess. And country, United States. That's good. Would I like to receive emails? Sure, that's fine with me. And then I'm going to claim, no, I'm not a robot. And it's going to ask me prove you're not a robot question. So I'm going to pick these squares and verify. And it seems to agree that I'm not a robot. So now I'm going to register. Okay, so we get a nice little link here, continue to download, and this website has worked the same way for several years now. It's pretty non-intuitive. Okay, so when you click continue to download, it takes you back to the page that you started on, and you have to navigate through that a second time. And that is actually the design. If you read the instructions, that's what it says to do. So I'm going to click on continue to download. And now I go back to the original page. And I find the tab for free downloads. Okay. And then I find the files that I can download, the book examples and exercises. And again, I want the top one, exe file for Windows. Now if I click on the Download Now button, it really will download. Trust me. So here we go. Yeah. So it looks like our file is going to be called msq2_allfiles.exe. All right. And that's going into the download directory. So I'm going to open up the File Explorer and go to Downloads. And here it is. It's MySQL2_allfiles. This is an application. This isn't a zip file. This is well, it's probably an executable zip file. But I can simply double click on that to execute it. Say sure, okay, give it a run. The directory that it wants to put the files into is the Murach directory on the C drive, and that's where I typically have my students keep the files, the ones who are working on Windows. So just leave everything to default and click the button for unzip. And it says it unzipped all 259 files successfully. So that looks pretty good. So I should have everything I want now. I've got MySQL Server Community Edition downloaded and installed. I've got MySQL Workbench Community Edition downloaded and installed, and I even installed the prerequisites for those. Okay, and now I've gone to the Murach site and I've downloaded and installed the example files that come with the book. And we need those installed too. So I should be able to close all this installing stuff, right? And let's just go and take a peek at those files we just installed. So I'll open the File Explorer again. It's on this PC. It's on the C drive. It's called Murach. There it is, right there. And under that, the next subdirectory, MySQL. And it's got the book scripts. These are all the examples from the books. Okay. The DB setup is what we're going to use in a minute or two. It has the .SQL script files that we're going to use to install the databases that are associated with the book. It's good. It's got diagrams. Okay, and there's a diagrammer that works with Workbench that this is an example for. We have the exercise solutions. So I'm not going to have you do the exercises that are at the end of each of the chapters of the book. Instead, I'm going to leave those as things that you can do on your own, and you can look up the answers. So for instance, the first chapter where we're going to be doing the exercises to hand in is chapter 3. Okay. And as you can see, the answers to all the chapter 3 exercises, or to many of them, is right here. Okay. So instead of having you do the exercises that are in the textbook, for which you already have the published answers, I'm going to be giving you another set of exercises that are a companion set from a case called My Guitar Shop. and I'm going to give you the starter files for that in about a week, which is going to allow you to load up that database and have all the starter files you're going to need to do those assignments. But in the meantime, you can go to your text and you can go to any chapter, and you can take any example. Okay, because you can you go to any page in the book that has an SQL script on it, and you can find it in this book scripts area, or you can go to the end to the exercises, and you can go to any exercise and give it a try, hopefully, before you look at the answer, and then you can look up the answer. Okay? And I find that a really good way to learn. All right, so help yourself there. There's some examples here of there's a Java program and a PHP program that have code in them to access a MySQL database. I'll talk about that when we talk about Chapter 1, but that isn't something I'm going to have you do. That's not one of the skills for the course. Neither of them are skills for the course. Good. All right, so that's where the files are. Now, how can we run the files? Well, one of the things that we want to do is we want to go find the files, the script files that set up the databases that come with the textbook, and run them so we'll be ready to work with our book. So the first thing we need to do is we need to do Workbench. We need to get that going. Now, typically when you have set the MySQL server up as a service, the server is going to be started when you start the operating system. Okay? So you're going to be okay on that. But let's look at Workbench. I'm just going to go and I'm going to find a list of installed applications. And let's just go down to M for MySQL. Okay, it's down at the end of the M's. And we take the drop down and we can say we've got MySQL Workbench 6.3 CE, and that's it. Now, I don't like to have to look for it every time I want to run it. So I'd like to pin it to the taskbar. So instead of just clicking on it to run it, I'm left clicking on it to run it, which you certainly may do anytime that you want to. I'm going to right click on this entry, and I don't want it to pin it to the start because that's not a convenient place for me. So I'm going to go and choose more, and then one of the options is pin to taskbar. So I'm going to pin it to the taskbar, and now you've seen it down here. So it's a blue icon with a dolphin on it. Okay, so here's what it's typically going to look like when we bring up our PC. Again, the server should already be started, and we're going to click on the icon that we put down in the taskbar. And now let's click on the connection here for local instance MySQL 57. Okay, and that looks good. And now, how do we open and run a script? Well, there are several ways to do it, but the easiest way that I know of is to use the toolbar. Okay, so we have this toolbar. We have this upper toolbar here. There's a toolbar that's just for the editor. Okay, And then there's a toolbar that's right kind of under the menu for the whole product. And the second entry from the left shows an open file folder, and it says open an SQL script. That's the one that we want. Okay. And now I just want to say, okay, it's on this PC. All right. And let's see if I can find C drive. I found the C drive. Double clicked on that. I went to Murach. I double clicked on that. MySQL. Double click on that. Book scripts. Double click on that. No, I don't want the book scripts. Sorry about that. So I'm going to go up to MySQL again. I want the DB setup. That's what I want. So double click on that. Now here are the script files. Again, these are all files that have a .sql file type extension. And the one that I want is called create databases. Okay? And this happens to be an interesting script file that includes references to the other scripts in the directory. So this one script, create databases, does everything that we're going to need to do that. So just highlight create databases and click open. And here's the script that creates the databases. And not only does it create the schema for the database, but it also inserts all the test data in the database. So we get all the tables for the relational database, and then we get them populated. So up here at the top of the editor panel, you'll see that there are two lightning bolt icons. The one on the right has a kind of I-beam on it, and that will execute the statement under the keyboard cursor. Okay? That's a little too confined for me. The one on the left doesn't have the I-beam on it. It says execute the selected portion of the script or everything. So I typically want to come in. I don't want to have selected a part of the text, and I just want to click the plain old lightning bolt, the left one, and that's going to execute the script, and you see the output from the server coming back down at the bottom. Okay, and that looks pretty good. All right, so what should this have done? Well, this should have created three databases, APEX and OM. The database that we use throughout the textbook is AP, Accounts Payable. EX has some examples in it that are kind of independent of that. And OM is Order Management, which we don't really talk about very much in the textbook, at least in the parts that I cover in our class. Okay, so if I go over to this navigation panel and I look under schemas, I see the three original databases we had the last time, but I don't see the three new ones. Well, that's because we need to refresh it. So right here, right to the right of schemas is a little swirly refresh icon. Click on that, and you can see we get OMEXAP. All right. Now, something that happens sometimes is when you go to look at the parts of the schema, when you first install all this, you can get a problem where it says it's fetching the tables. That eventually resolves, okay? But let's take a look. See, tables fetching. Okay, not too good. That only happens after our first install. And EX, we've got the same thing, but AP, let's see that one. That one looks okay. This is AP. So I'm going to pull down that so we can see. So these are the tables that make up the accounts payable database. And the tables include invoices, invoice line items, vendors, general ledger accounts, all these kinds of things. I just want to point out, and this is a thing that's a little confusing. Most people, when they think of invoices, they think of they work for some organization that has a product or a service, and they want to send invoices out to customers, and they want to get paid. So that's called accounts receivable. Okay. This is really the opposite side of this. These are things that our organization bought and we have to pay for. So these are invoices that have come to us from other organizations who have issued invoices to us for goods and services that we've consumed or will consume. We've taken delivery of them. And we're trying to track how many of them we have, what are the amounts, are they paid or not, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so that's what the accounts payable database is. And I'm going to show you one more trick here. The big table for accounts payable or AP is invoices. And I'm hovering over the invoices table line. And over to the right, I've got three icons. The first one is an information icon. So that gives us one view. The second one is a settings icon that has a wrench instead of an eye. And that is something that we'll be working with fairly extensively a little bit later in the course. That allows us to see that how the schema has defined the table. And then the third one is the data for the table. So I'm going to click on the third one. It looks like a grid. And what happens is it simply runs a query. It puts in a query for the invoices table and it runs it. And what we have over here is what we call a result set. Okay, so we're looking at this. This is a result grid is what we're looking at. Okay. And that's it. So we'll be talking about this Workbench client in a little more detail very soon. But for right now, I wanted to make sure that you had all the software that you needed and that you had it installed and that it ran and that you had the examples from the book and that they were installed and that we were able to use those. And we've more or less proven all of that to be true. So now we're going to leave. So something that happens often is you get a whole lot of these tabs up in the editor panel. And if I want to close them all, I can go up and click on one of the tabs, and that's the one that I'm going to be on. And I'll right click and I'll say close all. And now all the editors are closed. And now to close Workbench, I can just go to the upper right and click on the X, and I've closed Workbench. So that's it. I wish you luck with this, and I'm going to say bye until next time. Bye-bye.